I thought I knew the story of D-Day, until I discovered what happened when exhausted Americans almost opened fire on their own British allies. Over a cup of tea. You've been lied to about D-Day. You've seen the American side, but not the quiet British habits that kept men alive when everything fell apart. Let's fix that. June 7th, 1944. Early light creeps through the smoke still hanging over the Norman hedgerows. Sergeant Bill Morrison of the 29th Infantry Division crouches behind a low stone wall, his heart still pounding from Omaha Beach. Shapes move through the pale morning mist about 200 yards to the east. His finger tightens on the trigger of his M1. For a split second, he's ready to fire. Then, he notices the helmets. Different shape, flatter rim. The uniforms, a slightly different shade of olive. He hesitates. These aren't Germans. They're British. Soldiers moving inland from Gold Beach, pushing toward the American sector. Morrison has never actually seen a British soldier before. None of the men in his squad have. They trained in England for months, sure, but always on American bases, always among American units. Now, barely 36 hours after hitting Omaha Beach, still exhausted, still shaken from the landing, they're finally face to face with their allies. "Hold your fire," Morrison whispers. "They're ours." Well, theirs. You know what I mean. The British. The patrol draws closer. Morrison stands, lifts his arm, revealing himself above the wall. The lead British soldier halts. A lieutenant, judging by his insignia. He studies Morrison's squad, then steps forward, rifle slung casually over his shoulder. He looks young. Maybe 23, a thin mustache, a carefully neutral expression. 29th Infantry, the British officer asks. His accent clips the words, formal, precise. "That's right," Morrison replies. "You're from Gold Beach, 51st Division. We were supposed to link up around Port-en-Bessin." The British officer glances toward the column of smoke rising inland from Omaha Beach. "Bit rough yesterday," he says calmly. Morrison thinks of the beach, the bodies in the surf, the screaming. 6 hours of chaos before they finally clawed their way off the sand. "Yeah," Morrison says quietly, "rough." The British lieutenant nods once, as if Morrison has simply confirmed something he already knew. "We're moving toward Bayou. Your command aware we're operating here?" "They are now," Morrison says. The lieutenant allows himself the faintest smile, not quite friendly, not quite distant. "Good show. Carry on." He turns, murmurs something Morrison can't hear, and the patrol moves west. Morrison watches them disappear into the hedges. Corporal Eddie Hayes, a Brooklyn native, steps up beside him. "So that's the British," Hayes mutters. "What were you expecting?" "I don't know," Morrison replies. "More British, I guess. They look like us." "Different helmets," Hayes says. "Different uniforms. Did you see their rifles? Lee Enfields?" He nods to himself. "My dad carried one in the last war. Says they're solid guns. Fast shooter, slow bolt." Morrison watches the British patrol vanish into the green labyrinth of hedgerows, each man covering the next, spacing perfect, movement deliberate and controlled. "They look like they know exactly what they're doing," Morrison says. "So do we," Hayes answers. But there's uncertainty in his voice. Morrison doesn't reply. His mind is still on Omaha, on confusion and panic and the desperate rush forward. The British, by contrast, move as if this is routine, almost ceremonial. Not better, not worse, just different. By mid-morning, Morrison's platoon has pushed 2 miles inland. They encounter British forces 3 more times. Each meeting follows the same pattern: cautious identification, brief measured exchanges, then onward movement. The British are polite, efficient, and strangely unaffected by the war erupting around them. It's starting to unsettle the Americans. Private First Class Tommy Chen, a radio operator from San Francisco, finally puts it into words while they pause in a farmyard. "They're too calm," Chen mutters. He's staring across the courtyard at a British squad inside a shattered barn. They're brewing tea. Actually brewing tea. A small stove is set up on broken stone. Someone produces tea from a battered tin. Metal cups are passed around while a British sergeant studies a map. One man smokes a pipe. Morrison has seen men smoke cigarettes under fire. That makes sense. A quick drag, a shaky hand. But a pipe suggests leisure. Reflection. A Sunday afternoon. "Don't they realize there's a war going on?" Chen demands. "Maybe that's just how they are," Morrison says. "It's weird," Chen insists. "We're jumping at every noise and they're having a tea break." A stocky British corporal overhears and wanders over, cup in hand. "Fancy a brew?" he asks, offering Chen the cup. Chen accepts cautiously. He sniffs. "This is really tea." "Of course it is," the corporal says. "What else would it be?" "I don't know. Medicine, fuel." The corporal laughs, a short, sharp bark. "You Yanks can't function without coffee, eh? Same thing for us. Tea keeps you steady." He taps his temple. "Settles the nerves." Chen sips, grimaces. "It's hot." "That's the idea," the corporal says. Morrison accepts a cup when it's offered. The tea is strong and bitter. Nothing like the sweet iced tea his mother makes back home in Virginia. But it's hot, solid, grounding. The corporal was right. There's something calming about the ritual itself. The British have been fighting for nearly 5 years now. Maybe this is how you survive that long. "How long you been fighting?" Morrison asks. "Since 1940, the corporal replies. "Dunkirk, North Africa, Sicily, now here. No pride, no complaint, just facts." "You've had 2 days." He studies Morrison's face, then nods. "You'll get used to it, or you won't. Either way, keep your rifle clean and your head down." He finishes his tea and returns to his squad. Hayes leans close. 4 years of war and he's making tea in a barn. Either they're crazy, or we are. "Maybe both," Morrison says. As the day stretches on, the differences become clearer. Morrison's platoon is temporarily attached to a British company for an advance toward a crossroads roughly 2 miles south. The British captain, a tall, narrow-faced man named Peyton, briefs the mixed force in the same tone Morrison remembers from his high school principal explaining detention rules. Calm, measured, faintly bored. "The objective is this crossroads," Peyton says, tapping the map. "Jerry has a machine gun position here. Possibly a mortar team here. We'll advance in 2 columns, suppress the gun, and clear the position." Questions? Morrison raises his hand. "What if they've got more than 1 machine gun?" "Then we suppress both," Peyton replies, as if the answer is obvious. "The key is maintaining formation and not bunching up. Jerry rather enjoys it when you bunch up, makes his work easier." Morrison has more questions about flanking fire, reinforcements, artillery support. But Peyton has already moved on, issuing instructions to his platoon leaders with the same unhurried precision. The British soldiers listen, nod, check weapons. No visible nerves, no excitement, just quiet readiness. Lieutenant Kowalski, Morrison's platoon leader, pulls him aside. "What do you think?" he asks. "They've done this before," Morrison says. "So have we," Kowalski replies. Not like this, Morrison says, not for 4 years straight. Kowalski frowns. You think we should copy them? Morrison thinks it over. The British method is cautious, methodical. The American way emphasizes speed and aggression, hit hard, overwhelm fast. Different schools of thought, different wars fought. I think we should watch, Morrison says finally, and learn. The advance begins at noon. The British move forward in textbook fashion, each section covering the next, using every dip in the ground, every hedge, every fold of terrain. They move slowly. Too slowly, Morrison thinks at first. His instincts scream at him to sprint across the open ground, get it over with, close the distance. But the British don't rush, and soon he understands why. They never expose themselves unnecessarily. When they meet resistance, they stop. They assess. They bring up support. No blind charges, no wasted lives. When the German machine gun finally opens up at 50 yards, the lead British squad drops instantly. They return fire in controlled bursts while the sergeant calmly relays coordinates. Within half a minute, a mortar team adjusts its aim. 3 rounds later, the machine gun falls silent. Advance, Peyton calls. They move again, same pace, same discipline. Morrison's squad follows, forcing themselves to match the British rhythm. Every step feels unnatural. Hayes is breathing hard. This is taking forever, he mutters. But we're not getting shot, Morrison replies. They reach the crossroads 15 minutes later. The German crew has already withdrawn once the mortars found them. The British immediately secure the area. Defensive positions, patrols, perimeter. No celebration, no cheering. Just the next task. Peyton approaches Morrison. Your men handled themselves well. Good fire discipline. We followed your lead, Morrison admits. Sensible, Peyton says. You'll develop your own style eventually. Everyone does. He pulls out a silver cigarette case and offers one. The trick, he adds, lighting both, is surviving long enough to find that style. Morrison inhales. Is it always this controlled? He asks. Hardly, Peyton replies. Sometimes it's pure chaos. But structure gives the men something to cling to. He checks his pocket watch. We'll hold here until dark, then push another mile. Your officers can coordinate with my second-in-command. Get your men fed and rested. Morrison salutes. The British return salute is casual, almost a wave. Nearby, Hayes examines a British ration tin. It's got tea, he announces. The ration has tea. Of course it does, Chen says. Probably crumpets too. What's a crumpet? No idea, something British. Morrison sits, opening his own rations. Nearby, British soldiers eat quietly, trading dry remarks Morrison barely understands. One man reads a book while he eats. A British private notices Morrison watching. Fancy a swap? He asks. My tinned beef for your... What's that? Spam. Spam, the private repeats thoughtfully. What is it? Mystery meat. Ah, same as ours. He drops down beside Morrison without asking, lights a cigarette. You lot did well today, he says. First time fighting with us? First time meeting you, Morrison says. We trained in England but never together. The private frowns. That's mad. Allies kept apart. Maybe they thought we'd fight each other. Are we that different? Morrison considers. Yes, he says, but not badly. Well then, the private says, standing. That'll do. Name's Reg Cooper, Sheffield. Bill Morrison, Virginia. Tobacco country, eh? Try not to get shot, Bill. Be ashamed to lose a new mate. He wanders off, leaving Morrison unsure whether they're truly friends, or if this is just British humor. They're strange, Chen mutters. But decent, Hayes adds. Morrison nods. Different, he says, but worth respecting. As night approaches, Morrison's platoon lies beside a British platoon in a hedge overlooking a shallow valley. The British go to work immediately, deepening positions, improving cover, laying out clear fields of fire. The Americans, drained from 2 days of non-stop combat, mostly slump where they stand. After dark, the British platoon sergeant, a stocky Welshman named Davies, with an accent Morrison struggles to follow, walks over to Lieutenant Kowalski. "Your lads look absolutely knackered," Davies says. "We are," Kowalski admits, "whatever that means." "Dead tired," Davies explains. "When did they last get proper sleep?" "Before we got on the boats." Davies lets out a low whistle. "Right then, my men will take first watch. Yours sleep till midnight. Then we swap." Kowalski hesitates. "That's a lot of duty for your boys." "They'll manage," Davies says. "You won't, if you're falling asleep with a rifle in your hands." Morrison feels uneasy about it, feels guilty, but exhaustion wins. He curls up against the hedge and is asleep within minutes. A hand shakes his shoulder. "Midnight, your watch." It's Reg Cooper crouched beside him. "Anything happened?" Morrison asks groggily. "Quiet as a church," Reg says. "Jerry's probably just as worn out." He hands Morrison a canteen. Tea, still warmish. Morrison drinks. This time it's sweet, mixed with condensed milk. It clears his head instantly. "Thanks," he says. "No trouble. Your mate Hayes is over there. We've got the left covered." Reg pauses, then smirks. "And Morrison, your snoring could wake the dead." During his watch, Morrison studies the British positions. Even at night, even with men sleeping, discipline never slips. Sentries shift regularly. Whispered signals pass along the line. When Davies makes his rounds, he speaks quietly with each man, checking nerves as much as alertness. This isn't just training, it's habit. Hard-earned experience. Dawn arrives cold and grey. The British are already awake, brewing tea, cleaning rifles, preparing for the day. The Americans stir slowly, stiff and sore. "Tea first," Davies explains. "Always tea first. Then weapons, then breakfast, then gear check. Routine keeps you sane." "Don't you ever want to sleep in?" Chen asks. "Sleep in and get killed," Davies replies cheerfully. "Jerry loves dawn attacks, so we're always ready," ruins his plans. Later that morning, Morrison's platoon joins a British company for a farm clearing operation. The briefing is precise, detailed, complex. Multiple phases, tight timing, careful coordination. "This is simple," Captain Ashford says when Kowalski looks overwhelmed. "You should see a proper set-piece attack." The Americans are used to simpler plans. Go there, take that, hold it. The advance begins at 0800. The British assume every building is occupied, every hedgerow hides a gun, every gate might be trapped. They check everything. The Americans want to rush. "Why are we crawling?" Hayes whispers. "Because they want to be alive at the end," Morrison replies. By the time the farms are secured, they've uncovered 3 German positions that would have slaughtered a faster, less cautious force. During a pause, Morrison speaks with Lieutenant Thornton, a young British officer who escaped Dunkirk as a private. "How do you stay patient?" Morrison asks. Thornton smiles. "We learned the hard way," he says. "In 1940, we tried moving fast. Didn't work. Now we're thorough." "Doesn't it drive you mad?" Morrison asks. "Frustration gets you killed," Thornton replies. "Patience keeps you breathing." By afternoon, 12 German prisoners have been taken. No British casualties. That evening, Americans help the British reinforce a captured position. Lessons are sinking in, rations are shared, stories traded, songs follow, British music hall tunes answered by loud American singing. Reg sits beside Morrison. "You Yanks are all right," he says, "bit loud, bit chaotic." "And you lot are too calm," Morrison replies, "especially with tea under fire." "Tea keeps you human," Reg says. "You'll see." As night deepens, Morrison finds himself talking with Sergeant Davies about life before the war. Jobs, families, things left behind. "You married?" Davies asks. "Engaged," Morrison says. "Girl back in Richmond." Davies nods. "Wife and 2 kids. Cardiff. Haven't seen them in 3 years." He pulls out a worn photograph. Morrison studies the smiling faces. "You think this ends soon?" he asks. Davies looks toward the dark horizon. "We're in France," he says. "That's progress, but Jerry's still got teeth. Long way to Berlin." The next morning brings new orders. The British are heading east, the Americans west. The combined force is breaking apart. The 2 platoons gather to say goodbye. Davies shakes Kowalski's hand. "Good luck," he says. "Keep your head down." Reg approaches Morrison and presses a small paper-wrapped bundle into his hand. "What's this?" Morrison asks. "Tea," Reg says. "Proper stuff." "I don't know how to make it," Morrison admits. "You'll learn," Reg says. "Drink it when things get ugly." They shake hands. "See you in Berlin," Reg says. "See you there," Morrison replies. Weeks later, pinned down near Cherbourg, shells crashing nearby, nerves shredded, Morrison remembers the bundle. He brews that tea for his squad in battered mess tins over a tiny flame. It tastes awful, but it works. It gives them something small and human to hold on to while the world explodes around them. When the war ends in Bavaria, Morrison brews one last pot from the dregs of that same tin. They toast victory. "To the British," Morrison says. "To the British," the squad echoes. They drink and laugh. Because by then, the Americans have learned a quiet truth. Allies don't need to be the same, just reliable. In letters sent home, American soldiers describe their British allies with a blend of amusement and respect. They write about the tea, always the tea, about the calmness under fire, about discipline that feels almost unnatural to men fresh from Omaha's chaos. Some complain the British are slow, overly cautious, bound by rules. Others admire their professionalism, their experience, their refusal to take pointless risks. Most settle somewhere in between, recognizing that the British way of war is different, but effective. The British, in turn, find Americans aggressive, informal, sometimes reckless. But they also see energy, optimism, a willingness to learn. The 2 armies are shaped by different histories and different wars. Yet they learn quickly how to fight side by side. An American soldier from the 29th Infantry writes to his sister in July 1944, "The British are strange fellows. They drink tea instead of coffee. They stay calm when they should be scared and move slow when you expect them to run. But they've been fighting for 5 years and they're still here. That tells me they must be doing something right. I think we're learning from them." Another officer writes in his diary, "Linked up with British troops today. Expected stiff, formal men from the movies. Instead, found soldiers like us. Tired, determined, trying to survive. Different styles, same purpose. The partnership isn't perfect. There are disagreements over tactics, pace, command. Friction is inevitable, but shared hardship builds respect. The British bring experience, lessons paid for in blood at Dunkirk, in the Blitz, in North Africa and Italy. The Americans bring numbers, industry, and aggressive confidence. Together, they form a force that will push across France, into Germany, and toward victory. Those first meetings in Normandy lay the groundwork. Morrison carries that tin of tea through France, Belgium, and across the Rhine. He never quite masters brewing it properly. Too strong, too weak, always wrong. But he keeps making it. On May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, he brews one final pot. His squad drinks it without complaint. It tastes terrible. But it means they have survived. Different armies, different habits, same victory. And all across Europe, men who once thought they knew exactly how war should be fought, now understand something deeper. In the worst moments, it isn't just weapons and courage that keep you alive. Sometimes it's discipline. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's an ally who fights differently than you do. And sometimes it's a simple cup of tea.